one of the things I think is interesting is you think, okay, well, I'm going to go on a perpetual tropical vacation. There was also the realization that your problems don't stay behind. Even if you relocate yourself geographically, whatever wasn't working is going to come with you.
Amanda Jarman's sabbatical to Belize with her husband was supposed to last only 5 months. Yet upon arrival, it became clear to her that the journey was only just beginning. She'd chosen Hopkins, a small seaside village, as the perfect tropical paradise to recover from chronic health problems and burnout that was brought on by 60-hour work weeks. What she didn't expect there was to discover how much it felt like home. After going through an intense time of letting go and endings, she found the space to create a whole new way of living and working. She decided to live in Hopkins and says she's never felt happier and healthier. This is Leap Like Me, and I'm your host, Lisa Hawashi. This show is about the leaps people take to make the most of this amazing life. Amanda, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Oh, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk with you and share my story with your listeners. So thanks again.
To begin, I wondered if you could tell us a bit about what life and work are like for you right now.
Sure. In some ways, I almost feel weirdly guilty when I tell people about my life because it's awesome. So I live in Hopkins Village, Belize, which is a small village on the Caribbean Sea. And if you hear background noise, it's the sea breeze blowing through my home. I work very, very part-time. I own my own business and work online. So my goal is to work 10 or 12 hours a week. Otherwise, I have a lot of time to spend with my friends, to spend cooking and keeping my house nice, doing outdoor activities, hiking, paddle boarding, enjoying being in a warm tropical place with lots of activities and destinations. I mean, it's incredibly different. I was just reflecting this morning on what life was like for me 2 years ago, and it's just a really, really different situation for me now.
Would you tell us what was going on 2 years ago or around the time that your sabbatical story starts?
Sure. Yeah. So I lived in Portland, Oregon, which is a wonderful city and offers a lot. There's a lot of promise of living in a city. You know, there's lots of restaurants and places to go and things to do and live music. And I was not doing any of that stuff. Instead, I was sick all the time. I was tired. I had some like a variety of different health issues. Most concerning just chronic migraines and body pain and fatigue. So I was not well. And at the same time, I had learned that the house I lived in, so I bought a house in Portland. And I when I bought this house, I literally said, I'm going to die in this house, which teaches me a huge lesson about having fixed ideas of the future, because every time I try to do that, it doesn't seem to work out for me. So I bought this house. I'm like, I'm going to live here until I die when I'm like in my 80s. You know, I had this whole vision. And then I found out that the neighborhood I lived in was being polluted by a glass company, Bullseye Glass in Portland, Oregon. And they had been pumping arsenic and lead, cadmium, hexavalent chromium, just really, really nasty stuff into the air of our neighborhood for a few decades. I had been exposed for about 6 years at that point. And though I can't say that my chronic health issues were directly caused by their emissions, I really can't imagine that helped. So it's kind of a long story, right? I think any story that leads you to say, I'm going to pack up my life and go overseas for a while is usually kind of a long story. So bear with me. So my neighbors and I actually banded together and fought the factory and won, which was great. So Oregon actually changed their state law in response. the factory was required to add filtration devices to filter out the harmful chemicals that they had been putting in the air. And so that was great. It was a success story. But I was tired, and I realized that living in an industrial neighborhood was probably not the best bet for my future, even though that particular factory had been shut down in terms of their pollution. It was still a neighborhood that had a lot of diesel trucks going through. It still felt like the hustle and bustle of the city wasn't working for me anymore. And it just, I looked at my husband at the time, we've since split, and said, nothing's working. Like, we're both working really hard. I, owned my own business already at that point, which was a real blessing, because one of the things that enabled me to make a big life change was the fact that I was my own boss and was able to really actually own that. I mean, it's funny, the first few years that I owned my business, it really owned me, which is normal when you start a business. So that was piece of the whole, just stress and feeling like you were on this treadmill where every month I could pay my mortgage, but I was slipping a little bit deeper into debt and tired and not seeing my friends the way I would want to, and just not really showing up in the world in a way that felt really present and like I was enjoying it. And life is so short. And so I looked at my husband and said, well, this is just really not working. What we're doing isn't working. But we need to do something different. And so we thought of a lot of different ideas. One of our odd couple hobbies together was to come up with different like entrepreneurial schemes. And like we seriously got very close to starting a cat food business a few years ago. That's a whole other story that I'm not going to go into. But so that was something that was pretty delightful about our relationship together. So we had all these different ideas. Well, we could try this. What if we did this? And and like we finally settled on this idea of actually moving to rural Oregon and growing cannabis because it's legal there. And so we pursued that, and we were trying to buy this property, and it just didn't work out. And now I look back, hindsight, I'm like, oh, thank goddess, thank you that did not work out, because I'm right where I want to be. But at the time, it was very disappointing, of course. And so life was really weird and not working. And at one point, I just looked at my ex and I said, F it, let's go to Belize. And people say, where did that come from? I say, I don't know. I really don't. It just came out of my mouth. And oddly enough, he said, sure. So it wasn't really a big planning process, but that's what life looked like before. It was just not functional.
So what was your original plan at that point when you said, let's go to Belize?
So the idea was to come down here for 5 months. And I don't remember how I settled on 5 months, but that seemed like reasonable. And I had this dream for quite some time of living overseas, particularly during the winter. Anyone who has traveled to Portland, Oregon, or lived there during the winter knows exactly why I would say that. It gets dark and cold and wet and dismal for a long time. And so the idea of living somewhere sunny and just skipping a winter was beautiful. And so I had that in the back of my mind, even when I had started my business, although I'd been more fixated on Mexico. But for whatever reason, Belize came into my mind as the thing to do.
Okay, so you had your plan of 5 months. What else was part of the plan?
So we had this idea we would be there for 5 months. And so the next step that I did was to start really researching where in Belize. And I also said, you know what, am I sure about Belize? And so I did a little bit of research and said, yes, absolutely. There was a lot to recommend it to me. So it has the world's second largest barrier reef. And I wanted to do something that was going to be restful, but also let me do some fun touristy vacation sorts of activities. So snorkeling was a definite must. And so I thought, okay, world's second largest barrier reef, that's great. And it also has jungle and monkeys. And so the idea that we could go do jungle hikes and see monkeys. And then the more I researched, the more I just thought, wow, this place sounds pretty incredible. It's a destination that's popular with tourists, but it's not crazy overdeveloped. It's pretty dense, sparsely populated, both in terms of Belizeans and the tourists that visit here. So that sounded really nice. It sounded pretty laid back, depending on where you go in the country. Oh, and the other thing that's helpful is that English is the official language. And though yo hablo un poco de español, that would have been a whole learning curve, that being in a place of just exhaustion and needing to go somewhere and just have it be kind of, I'm not going to say Belize is easy because it's not by any means. There's a lot of challenges living here, but language was not one of them. And so that made it a little easier too. So once I looked into this and said, hey, actually, I think my gut was onto something, then I started to really home in on where do I want to be. And I thought, I don't think I want to live on an island for 5 months. And I also thought about, do I want to move around? Do I want to go somewhere and be, here for a month, there for a month? And I thought, no, I really want to be in a place and settle in place and live there and feel what it's like to live somewhere so different than where I'm from and to have that experience of cultural immersion. So I ended up settling on Hopkins Village because being at the beach was really important to me. But Hopkins is also very small. It's not super touristy. I mean, it's definitely a tourist destination, but it still feels like a place where people live because it is. And that was important to feel like a sense of hominess, I guess.
And you mentioned that this was really a big focus as you made this plan, was to help recover from this sense of exhaustion. What was that process like once you arrived in Belize?
I love that you asked that. One thing that I did was just really try to focus on my restorative practices. So meditation, yoga, and it was actually really funny. So this is just so Belize. We, when we came down here, we rented a cabana. And the way things happen in Belize is usually by happenstance, but it always works out. So you need to see so-and-so and you will run into them on the street that day. I needed a place to stay. And I got in touch with our real estate agent about a different place. And that wasn't a place that I didn't actually want to stay. And she was like, oh, well, I don't know about what you're talking about, but I have a place for rent. And so, okay, so great. So we go and stay there. And so I had this whole thing in mind of, I'm going to be relaxing and meditating and doing yoga. And oh my goodness, there was this neighbor to the back. And this is very common in Belize. People love loud music. And I don't fault them for that. But this neighbor loved loud music at all times of the day. And then my landlords had like a perpetual construction project. So it was just pretty funny because I'm here doing like this meditation and yoga and like restorative practices. But in the background, it's like boom, 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 like just like bass and saws. And so that was a lesson in and of itself, was to find some peacefulness even in an environment that felt a little less than tranquil. Although, side note, we lasted for about 3 months there and then moved somewhere a lot more quiet. Okay, but what else did I do? I spent a lot of time, more than I wanted. Like, I actually ended up feeling kind of depressed, which was weird and not what I expected. And I think part of that was I came down here at the end of October of 2016, and then the election happened. And that was, I think, incredibly depressing for many of us. And so that was a piece of it, just feeling, wow, I'm so far away from my home country while this really awful thing is unfolding. And I don't know what to do about it. And I feel paralyzed and I feel angry and I feel distraught. And so that was a piece of it. There was some of that. And then there was some personal stuff too. I mean, one of the things I think is interesting is you think, okay, well, I'm going to go on a perpetual tropical vacation. I'm going to go live by the sea and it's going to just be pina coladas and relaxation all the time. And there was that, but there was also the realization that your problems don't stay behind. Even if you relocate yourself geographically, whatever wasn't working is going to come with you if you bring it. So part of what wasn't working for me was where I was living. So I left that behind. Great. My job, as it was structured at that time, my business and how I was running my business wasn't working. And so taking a break out from doing that was wonderful. Although then that brought the weird stress of, I'm not actively earning income. Oh my goodness. I am going to absolutely end up homeless and starving in the street, which is not, that wasn't a realistic fear for me. And so that was a piece of it too, working through some of my own fears and like Puritan work ethic stuff of, if I'm not earning money at this moment, then what value do I have? And I'm going to end up destitute and nobody will support me. And, there was that. And then, I won't talk in a ton of detail about this, but also realizing that my marriage wasn't working and that I love my ex-husband very much. He's a wonderful friend. He's a great guy. And we weren't supposed to be together in that way anymore. And that was oddly so much beauty and joy in discovering a new cultures, I should say. Belize has a lot of different people here, many different languages spoken, and learning from people has been delightful. And, all these new ways of thinking about things and different expressions and new skills. Like I know how to scale a fish now, which I did not know before. So in the midst of all this beauty and joy and learning and growth and making new friends, there was also this releasing of a lot that wasn't serving me anymore. So that was a really interesting and unexpected part of the journey for me when I first arrived here. So, and then another piece that was interesting was the dawning realization that I didn't want to move back to the United States, that I wanted to stay here in Belize, that this felt like home, and not really knowing why, quite frankly. And I didn't even really start to put all the pieces together until a few months ago. And I've now been here almost 2 years, but there was something in my heart that said, stay here. You need to be here, stay here. And so starting to hear that voice and thinking about what to do with that and what it could possibly mean. And then, and then facing the logistics of actually really moving here versus coming here for a long vacation. So it was weird. It was a really weird and beautiful and painful experience.
Yeah, it's really incredible to hear about the changes that happened for you and just to hear about that, kind of like what you're saying, the revealing or the opening up of sort of those realizations. And I wonder if you have any insight into, like, for example, sometimes people contact me and they say, okay, I took a sabbatical. I took my year off. I had quit my job. And now I'm at the end of my year and I don't have a job and nothing's working out for me. Like, what do you think happened to make your story different?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if I did anything magical to make that different. And this is going to sound really cheesy, but I think listening to your gut and following your heart and really using a sabbatical as a time to be open and to listen and to make space. So, just talked a little bit about that process of making space, of realizing what's not serving you in your life and letting those things fall away from you. And I think that was a big piece of it for me. I think also there was an element of blind faith of, I decided to stay here and I really had no idea why or what it was going to be like. And even when I decided I was going to stay here, I pictured things a lot differently than they're even turning out now. And so I think there was a degree of openness that has really served me well, and trying to release my expectations for what would happen. It was interesting. So my best friend gave me some advice about something recently. And she's like, well, girl, I really think you need to make a list of all the things you want. What are your priorities here? What are your must-haves and your nice-to-haves? And I said, you know what, girl? I mean, yeah, that's what I would have done in the past. But honestly, that hasn't really served me very well. And so, and then I just said like the most like woo-woo, hippy-dippy thing. I said, I'm just really trying to be open to experiences and see what resonates with me. And she was like, oh my God, where did you come from? What is this hippie stuff that you're saying? And it's funny because I think one of the things that's interesting about the specific location that I'm in, Belize, is that people really spend time thinking about their philosophy of life, how they experience life, whether they're happy or not, what the vibe is like. And again, this sounds just like super like hippy dippy. But there's a big like Rasta influence here. There's a lot of spirituality. People are very well considerate about how they approach their day and how they do things in the world and how life goes. And so I talk about the vibes more than I ever would have when I lived in Portland. And I think it's a little bit confounding to people. I think They're just like, whoa, who's this girl? I'm like, well, I was thinking about them the whole time, but now I talk about them too.
So yeah, this is an interesting area maybe to explore is what do you think this change, like what elements of yourself were able to be expressed by making some of these changes that maybe had been not so expressed in your previous life?
Yeah, I love that question. I have thought a lot about that because I feel like I've gotten the opportunity to actually live out my values in a way that I haven't in the past. Like, if you had asked me what I valued, I would have told you, oh, well, I value my friends and I value eating healthy and la la la. But really, the way I was expressing myself in the past was pretty much through working. And that was what I focused the majority of my life energy on was being in my career and working and having achievement there, which I mean, in a lot of ways is what has enabled me to be here in Belize because I was able to build a successful enough career to say, I'm going to go live in the Caribbean and do work online. So I don't want to knock that as a piece of my life. I think it really gave me a foundation that I could stretch out from, which is good. But now I just have this space and this time to do other things. And one of the things that has really surprised me is the deep network of friendships that I've found here. I When I decided to stay, I did have friends here. It wasn't like I didn't know and like people, but I didn't have the deep connections that I've managed to build in the last couple of years of time being here now. And I've never given or received so many favors in my life. And I think part of it is just a way of life here. If you want any major shopping done, it's a 30-minute drive to the nearest town. And the thing you're looking for may not be there. You might have to go to the city an hour and a half away or 3 hours away. I mean, that's just a small example. But if you're going to town, you're probably going to ask your neighbors if they need something. And it's just these small little ways that we have to rely on one another here that make this social network that's really strong and really connected. And being able to be part of that and to when a friend calls and says, I'm having a rough day, I don't say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't talk right now. I have a million meetings lined up. I say, oh, I have time. What's going on? Oh, do you need me to come over, bring you a cup of tea or whatever? And that is just really lovely. So that's been really important to me. I also find that I have more time to pursue external hobbies, not just to do my work. So I've recently been working on a fun side project. I'm actually doing a food blog about my village because we have dozens of excellent restaurants and a real amazing culture of traditional food preparation. And I love writing and I love eating. So I thought, well, this is a great way to combine those interests.
And have an excuse to do more of it.
Yes, exactly. And I've teamed up with a photographer who's from the village. So he knows everyone and everything. And his photos are beautiful compared to my iPhone photos, which are not so exciting. So that's kind of in the works and very thrilling. Or just being able to go hiking. I've been hiking almost every week this year. That was my New Year's resolution, was to go hiking every single week. And mostly I've been able to accomplish that, although weather and illness have stymied me a couple of times. So it just feels like life has space, and that space allows me to more fully embody the things that I want to experience in the world and the values that I want to bring forth. So that is really hard to achieve when you're working 60 hours a week and you're fatigued. As I know some people are able to do it, but I think there's a real myth of how we should work. These ideas around being always busy and that exhaustion is a badge of pride and that we can just drink some more coffee and plow through it, and that there's this reward in the future of retirement if we just do it now, just go to that next meeting and do the next thing. And I don't mean to make that sound overly simplistic, because there are economic realities bound up in all of that. We all need food, clothing, shelter, and hopefully even, avocado toast or whatever thing we're trying to shame millennials for enjoying. And I think it's a real privilege that I was able to step outside of that in a way. And not everyone can, but some people can. And I would definitely say that if folks have the ability to evaluate how their relationship with their work is impacting their relationship with everything else in their life, it's a good thing to do. And I think that's a lovely thing about sabbatical is, by definition, you're not doing your regular work. And that gives you a time to step away and really think about what that looks like and whether you could structure it in a way that's more humane to yourself.
Would you tell us a little bit more about your business and how you went through that sort of restructuring for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I own a consulting firm. It's called Fundraising Nerd, and I work with nonprofit organizations. And my work is really specific. My expertise is in donor database management. For example, if you give money to a charity, they'll keep track of who are you, what day did you give the money, how much did you give, what is it for? And that helps them both to manage the money better, but also hopefully to build a relationship with you over time where you continue to give them money. So I help nonprofit organizations do that better. And that's really been the majority of my career. In 2013, I'll be honest, I was tired of having a boss. And I thought, I really would like a little bit more autonomy and flexibility in my life. Ironically, when I started my business, I had this vision of like, I'm going to be working part-time, because when you start a business, you think no one's going to hire me. I'm going to be scraping and be broke. And so I was like, I'm going to be working part-time. And so I'm going to put all this time into like my garden and making fresh food. And I'm going to have to make my own cat food to save money. So I had this very detailed fantasy of what this was going to look like. And instead, I was just slammed, which is great. But being the kind of personality that I am, I said yes to pretty much every project. And oh, yeah, I can do it immediately. And just really overworked myself. And one of the things that I think now is I started my company out of exhaustion, which is funny. I mean, I was already tired in 2013, and and it's like, what a crazy reason to start a business. That probably would have been a good time to like sell my house and go on sabbatical, but that's not what I did. I was, I was firmly committed to this house that I was going to die in at age 85 or whatever. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to start a business and be making my own cat food and in the garden, la la la. But actually, I ended up working 60 hours a week and just really taking myself to the point of extreme burnout. So that by the time we reached summer of 2016, I was in quite a state. And it was really interesting to go through the process of winding down the business and then winding it back up again. And frankly, I'm still kind of in a little bit of a wind up phase with it. Although, I have clients right now, I have exactly the number I would like, which is 2 instead of 8 or 10 or whatever crazy thing I was trying to do. And I think that's something that is really important about owning your own business, is that you can set limits on your time. So one of the things then that was really exciting to realize is, oh my goodness, I own my own business. I had this vision of what it would look like, but then I kind of slipped right back into old habits and patterns of, overcommitting myself, taking on too much. And it's funny now, I work part-time. I haven't started my garden yet, but that's on the horizon. I make a lot of healthy food and my own cat food. So all of those things I imagined back in 2013 have finally come to fruition. It just took some time to get there. And I think the sabbatical really helped with that. And again, there is an aspect of place, which is really interesting. So it's not just that I took time out from life and went somewhere different and did different things for a while. But I think also there's something about the unique culture of Belize. I know a lot of people who own businesses here, and if they want to close their restaurant to go fishing, that's what they'll do. And that's okay. People who could work all year long, but don't. because they want to enjoy the quality of their life as well. And so, and that's not to say that people here don't work hard. I see people work harder than I could even imagine many people in the United States conceiving of. So it's not that there isn't hard work, but it's also balanced with a real value of family, of friendship, of finding joy in life, of being relaxed. And that was a lesson that I think I was able to absorb and start to apply to myself. So I think that's something interesting too when people are considering a sabbatical, and something that I didn't think of ahead of time. I mean, I'll be really honest. I was like, tropical beaches. And that was kind of all I was thinking of. I wasn't necessarily thinking, like, what's this going to mean culturally? But I think that's something to consider is wherever you're going for sabbatical, is there something culturally that you might learn? Or, I mean, you will learn things. And so is there a particular lesson that you're needing, and how might that align to where you go geographically?
I like that. Yeah. I remember traveling to Thailand for the first time, and I felt like it was such a happy place. And I thought, why don't I always go to happy places? It's like we do have some choices around this.
Absolutely. And not that I can think of, I mean, okay, I could probably list some unhappy places. I'm not going to try that right now. But yeah, it's just an interesting way of thinking about it.
Well, to wrap up our conversation, I want to ask you my 3 key questions. Number 1, what do you wish you had known before you took your leap?
Yeah, I think I wish I had known not to make plans for after. So after my sabbatical, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I still thought I would be coming back to Oregon and buying land, and actually ended up like really wasting some time and money on that idea. And I wish I had just left that space open to say, I don't know. I don't know what will happen afterwards, and not made any commitment of my finances. That was my particular mistake. Or, for people who are listening, making promises that maybe you won't want to keep when you're done. So just really leaving yourself some open space at the resolution of your sabbatical.
I think that's great advice. Some people have asked me, that they're kind of weighing the decision of like, should I buy an apartment before I go on sabbatical so that I can have some rental income? And, it kind of feels like an important investment. And from my own experience, I also found that being open and not tying up resources was the way to go.
Yeah. If somebody asked me that, I would say, no, don't. I mean, the rent would be nice, but then you don't know what you're going to want. And that's part of it, right? I mean, I think probably maybe there are some people out there listening who are like, my life is perfect and great just as it is, so I'm going to take a sabbatical from it. But you often take a sabbatical because things aren't working, and you don't know what the answer is, and you need time to think about it. And so leaving your self space to come up with those answers is really critical.
What was the most unexpected thing to come of your leap?
Yeah, I think that finding my place in the world, I just really didn't imagine that a fishing village in rural Belize was where I belonged. If you had told me that 5 years ago, I would have looked at you like you were insane. Yeah, I never imagined that I would be so happy hauling water occasionally. I mean, oh my gosh, if you have running water, just be really grateful, because I usually do, just to be clear, but sometimes I don't, and it's crazy. And, I've never been happier in my life. And there are insects biting me constantly. There are scorpions. It's hot sometimes. I mean, you could make a list of complaints that goes on and on. I feel like I have to balance all of the lovely things I've said about where I am. But yeah, I never imagined myself finding home here, and really feeling this very deep sense of connection to the people that I know here, both people who are from this village and other people like the quirky wanderers who it wasn't working for wherever they were at their home part of the world, who've immigrated here. And the weather, the the crazy storms and the rain and the sea and the mountains, I just feel a real deep sense of love and connection and curiosity. That's something that's really interesting. I felt a sense of home and place where I lived in the Pacific Northwest, and feeling that connection growing here has been really exciting. And it's also interesting to live somewhere so different from where you're at, because every day contains aspects of learning and of curiosity. So I think there's just an element of unexpected on a daily basis, and feeling so at home in the unexpected, I think, is how I would sum that up.
For someone who's thinking of doing something similar, what's one piece of advice you'd offer?
Okay, I'm going to give like a more like woo-woo, like spacey sort of vague answer, and then I'll give a really practical tip.
Okay, great.
But in terms of like the woo-woo spacey, don't be trapped by the conventional narrative of what you're supposed to be doing with your life. There are just a lot of stories that we learn from ourselves, from our parents, from our teachers, from our society about what life is supposed to look like. And I think we can get really stuck in that. And there are sometimes these moments where we're able to just stop for a minute and step aside and look and say, wow, I can imagine this being different. And those moments don't come every day. So when you have one of those moments, really pay attention, take advantage of that moment, imagine what could be different. And for you, it might not be moving to tropical paradise. That's not everyone's dream. And that's not within everybody's, realistic means. But we all have those moments where we're able to observe our life and make some decisions about what we want it to look like going forward. And so pay attention to that when it happens. That would be my big kind of esoteric piece of advice. On a practical level, look into a mail scanning service. I love mine. So you can just Google it, mail scanning service. There are ways to redirect your postal mail to somebody who will scan it for you, post it to the internet so that you can keep abreast of all of your things. And you can even receive checks that are forwarded to your bank account, which I love. The other thing is I use Google Voice, not to like rep Google. I'm sure there are other services that would work similarly, but I was actually able to keep my US-based phone number and call and text with people for free. So that's something just on a practical level. Technology is enabling people to do things that they couldn't have dreamed of a few years ago. I don't think that the internet infrastructure in Belize, even 5 years ago, would have supported me running my own tech-based business from this country. And some of the tools that I'm able to use in terms of mail scanning and voice over internet have just gotten really nice and can enable you to do business from nearly anywhere in the world. So on a practical level, there's just a lot of tools out there that are available. And I'm always happy to share more with people if that's something they're interested in terms of the really nitty gritty, how to do this.
Great. Well, that's a great lead into my last question, which is how can people stay in touch with you? Or also, I don't know if you want to share your food blog with us, but I would love to take a look at it.
Okay. Well, so there's two ways to stay in touch with me. One is through my consulting business that's called Fundraising Nerd. So fundraising, like lifting up, nerd, like you're a geek. So fundraisingnerd.com. And then my food blog is almost live. And so by the time this airs, it should be. And it's called hopkinseats.com. Hopkins as in Hopkins, Belize, and eats as in food. So I would love to hear from people about what you think about that. I love my business. I enjoy doing what I do, but I'm also pretty excited about getting into the realm of food and travel writing. So I would love feedback on that. And there's a contact form on either of those websites that will go right to me. And I'm really happy to answer questions about anything. It doesn't have to be related to food or to my business. But if I can help encourage other folks along a similar path, I would love to be a resource to you. So don't be shy about getting in touch.
Well, thank you, Amanda, already for being a resource and sharing your story with us today.
Oh, you are so welcome. This was really fun. And again, thanks so much for inviting me.
Thanks so much for listening to today's show. I really hope you got some inspiration today and some new ideas from our conversation. Don't forget to head over to my website, lisahawashi.com, to see photos of Amanda and her beautiful home in Belize, as well as to check out some additional links and resources that she's provided. If you've enjoyed the show, we would love it if you help us get the word out. Leave us a review or rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and share it with your friends and family. Also, if you're thinking of taking your own leap or are in the midst of one, we've got support and resources for you. 1, join the Leap Like Me community on Facebook. Here you can support one another, share your stories, and also ask me anything. 2, if you want more in-depth support, contact me about coaching. I coach both individuals and groups of 2, couples, and business partners to clarify what they really want in work and life and finally go after it. Visit lisahawashi.com or ping me at lisahawashi on Facebook or Instagram. Until next week, thanks again for listening to Leap Like Me.